I have a hard time when I'm inevitably asked, "Where are you from?" Because I'm from two different worlds. One that I live in and recognize very, very well, and another one that I don't recognize very much at all the older I get. I spent most of my life in British Columbia, having been born just outside of Vancouver. But there was a time when we lived as a family in Alberta in what would have been known as a bedroom community in those days called St. Albert, which is just north of Edmonton. I'm not sure if my sister considers herself from St. Albert or not, even though we moved there 8 weeks before she was born and they started construction on our house the day that Mom was in the hospital laboring to have her. Though for many years, Mom joked with good humor about being in the hospital laboring while Dad was at the construction site taking photos, it's symbolic of what was going on. Dad had been promoted, so we moved provinces, and they were having a custom home built in a brand new neighborhood. Ours was the first on our cul-de-sac. It was what I can only imagine the idyllic impressions of the post-war dream must have been like. We did the usual stuff there, like getting first pets and learning to ride a bike without training wheels, the inevitable scraped knees. And GPS actually came in the form of bikes there. You just had to have your bike out front of your friend's house, and that's how your parents knew where you were. A big concern would have been who got the first Nintendo, which was my neighbor. They got the Nintendo first. Then we got the SNES the following year, so it felt pretty good to be in my house then. Uh, we also got the very first home computer, the 386, with a 10-inch color monitor and both sizes of floppy disk drives. I was too young to really remember or participate in the moving process. I was 3.5 when we moved there. So all I can do is remember my impressions of that place, which are mostly sensory. I couldn't have articulated anything very much. But everything felt big there and new there. Nothing was old there. The only thing that seemed old to me at that age and like my old life that I'd known so far was the 76 Malibu that my parents had belonged to my dad since trade school. Um, and all our general possessions. But otherwise, everything was new all the time. I recognize it now that it's because it's flat. There were no mountains and huge trees to obscure the huge sky. That was the difference. We lived in this snaky swirl of cul-de-sacs with stakes in the ground at the beginning to denote each lot. The big sky gazed down on our new family of 4 in our new vinyl-sided house, and we had everything we needed. Before long, other vinyl houses popped out of those concrete pits of varying sizes and shapes. Ours was green, but the others were yellow, blue, tan, or white. Those houses filled up with families just like ours. By the time I was 5 and the neighborhood was essentially fully built, uh, it felt like I'd always lived there. And this place could only be the place of happy things. Nothing bad could happen here. Except for the bitter cold in winter. That was interminable. That was bad. Throughout our 8 years in Edmonton, we would travel back periodically to BC to visit family and catch up. So by the time we were moving back to BC when I was 12, I'd made some more memories of BC, and was fond of water and trees and mountains. However, it didn't feel like a homecoming when we were called back. It felt like the end of a significant series of events so that a new batch could kind of crawl out of the ground. We left the green ticky-tacky neighborhood for the more modern stucco of Abbotsford. My life had two defined segments, Alberta and BC. Today, in 2025, I can add a couple of new segments, post-marriage and Trump. It's called a ministerial order right now in Edmonton to get rid of certain classic books, although they're trying to backpedal and say they're going to keep the real classics and get rid of the inappropriate ones, whatever that means. It's a book ban, but in conservative speak. In a place where I went to French immersion and learned to read both in English and French, I find it challenging that certain books that I would go on to read later in high school in British Columbia are now being banned in the place where I grew up. I sit here in the limbo of being almost divorced in the Okanagan, looking at this other province that shaped me, feeling that pull of the wide gaze of sky beckoning. Come back so you can understand. I've been Danielle Walker, and this is why I do not know where I come from.